make sure
So
it goes.
exciting. I feel like Wayne's World every time we do this.
You guys are awesome.
It's kept us occupied. It kind of makes the weeks have a little bit of division and it doesn't all blur
Okay.
You do it every
So
week?
and we're live now, but we have.
All right.
So first, welcome to this week's Policy in Pilsner. And we've been doing this basically every week since we've been stuck in my garage because
well, to be clear, we've got out of the garage, so I don't want people to start calling like
I don't get out of the
Dave
garage
Protective
much.
Services and wondering his wife isn't letting him out.
I do work in here, I do counsel in here, and I do these in here. And I have it set up. I got a gym in here. I've got a couch I put in here. We have a TV in here. I could just hang out.
I think he was really hoping to self-isolate in here at some point.
That's right. If I have to self-isolate, I can. It's fine. But so
welcome.
I'm Councilman Dave DeMott for the City of Westminster. We have my wife Vanessa DeMott with us tonight, who's the candidate for HC 29 this year, and we have special guest Matt Durkin, who is the candidate for the Republican side for the next Jefferson County DA. And I know that you put it out on your Facebook, but since we're on here today, I am officially endorsing Matt to have that position. Everybody knows, like, I'm super pro law enforcement, and the things that the DA's office cover obviously as somebody who's very much behind law enforcement is very important to me. So I truly believe that you're going to be a good next DA, and I'm confident that you're going to be our next DA. So I want to put that out there that I am endorsing him officially. So with that, the first thing we usually do is, Matt, we usually want to know what's in people's pint, and you're the special guest. We'll let you share what you're drinking tonight first.
Excellent. Well, Dave and Vanessa, thank you so much for having me live from our Durkin for DA studios. Thank you so much, Dave, for that endorsement. I just have a ton of respect for both of you up in Westminster, and so it means a lot. And Vanessa, you're going to be a great representative, and so I just look forward to a great conversation. Tonight, I am drinking out of my Matthew Durkin for DA pint. Tonight is Fat Tire, so I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Matt's good people all the way around. Look at that.
What do you have tonight?
What do I have tonight? So I'm in my last 3 weeks of school, and that means it's finals time. So I am partying real hard with leaded coffee and sugar-free creamer because I got to get back to projects and research papers after this is over. But it is all for the greater good. I'm excited. I'm near that finish line. So, even better though, this is my special mug. I had it made by a great friend, Lisa, and I got it as a Christmas present. So there are some great crafts and great small businesses here in Westminster and Colorado. So just make sure you're always supporting those. Shameless plugs. Shameless plugs.
I see we have some people watching. Hello to former Mayor Nancy McNally. Ashley's on. Melanie's on. Councilor John Bowles is watching. Hello, John. I thought I saw
Representative Tracy. I see her on
Tracy
there.
was on. So I am drinking lemonade and rum. It's ice, but I'm boring. There's not a lot of low carb things that you can drink, and I'm trying to stay low carb. This has been really rough, being like there's stress eating involved, and you can DoorDash anything right now. Like Lamar's Donuts, they're gonna be the end of my diet. It's horrible.
Yeah. Can you outlaw some donut places? Because maybe that would help the diet. That's not free.
Outlaw donuts.
That was a test, and you
won. They're gifts from God. That's all I can say about donuts. They are gifts from God.
I don't know.
Donuts and coffee. That's where we're at.
Former Chief of Police Lee Burke, that I got to know really well during. Initially I met him during the whole Ridgeway situation, and because he was at the helm through that. And I got to know him really well while I was running for office the first time, and eventually being in office, which he's no longer our chief, and he wasn't when I finally won. But he used to say in our academies, when people say, "Well, do you like donuts?" He's like, "Well, of course I like donuts. Who doesn't like donuts?" That's basically a dumb question. I'm like, that's a fair point.
It doesn't just stop at the police.
With my dad being a retired policeman, when I was a teenager, I thought that was the best thing in the world to call him at work. He's like, you got any donuts? I know you do. I know that's what you guys are doing. And he's like, shut up. I'm busy. What do you want? So I thought that was a perfect answer, though.
That's where donuts are at.
So
So that's why we need to get past COVID. So maybe you need to tell us, now that we're kind of moving into that phase, where do we look for COVID? Like, what are we concerned about? What are those pieces? I guess you as the DA, and you've been collaborating with other municipalities, other jurisdictions. What are you wanting to encourage and educate residents on?
Well, there's so many things going on with COVID right now. Right now, as we're about to come out of it, and thank goodness for that. And I just can't say enough good things about the strength of our first responders. That's law enforcement. Those are emergency medical personnel, and all of the other frontliners, from doctors to nurses to grocery store workers. I mean, they have pulled us all through something that hopefully we never have to do again. But we are still, quite frankly, we're still in it. And we're very concerned with a lot of crime that we're seeing or that we're concerned about. First of all, scams, please just be careful. It's the same advice before COVID, but we know that criminals are innovative, and we know that they are going to take advantage of people who are afraid and they're confused. And that goes along with the CARE Act stimulus money that's coming back, that they will try to reach out and contact you via email or phone, and they'll try to ask you to give them your financial information or your personal identifying information. And just understand, IRS isn't emailing or calling anyone. So if it feels funny, it probably is. And also, if it is too good to be true, again, it probably is. And they're going to target folks who are probably most vulnerable. So just be aware of scams during this time. And other things that we're concerned about right now is a rise in domestic violence. We're concerned about the actual numbers of domestic violence cases that we're seeing. We're also concerned about probably the numbers that we're not seeing, that there's probably more domestic violence out there than we are seeing. And that goes along with child abuse too. So on that note, please reach out to your friends and your family, your loved ones, your neighbors, and just see how they're doing. Ask the questions that need to be asked, and provide a resource
For sure.
for them that they may not have if they were out in the community.
You know, to piggyback on that, Matt, when you talk about child abuse, being that it's April, it's Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month. Let our community know there's ways you can report that anonymously. You can 1-844-CO4KIDS. You can go online. You can call even your local dispatch departments. They will investigate these. It's not just you call and everything's done and over. This is, an investigation. I think you bring up such a good point that there are so many layers in our society. It's just not black and white. Everybody's not home and safe. There's a lot of context within that. So
I would add to that. I think that Safe to Tell is still operating. And so I think that's also still a resource if you're concerned about somebody who might be in the school system or a child.
Absolutely.
I know they brought that up on, we had a report from our chief of police on Monday at our city council meeting. He said our domestic violence is actually down, but I think we all agreed that the concern is if you're trapped at home with your, if the person causing domestic violence on you and you can't leave, I mean, it's a lot odder right now for you to be leaving your home. So I think that is definitely a concern, and it's important that we have those resources. But I mean, it's a scary time. I mean, the other thing that I've seen a huge rise in is the people reaching out to mental health providers, because we've seen people lost their jobs. They don't know how they're gonna, and frankly, this is just stressful in general. I mean, a lot to worry about, your safety and all these other things. I have seen too, you had mentioned about people trying to use the CARES Act and the situation in general to victimize people. So I'm an IT guy by day, and so I've had to share a lot of that with the company that I am the head of the IT department for, as far as scams we've seen, like phishing scams. I've seen ones where they're like, oh, the newest information on COVID, and they try to make it like a news flash, hoping people will click on it. Or the other one is, I've seen a lot in the city as far as having to warn people about, the IRS isn't going to call you on the phone and ask for your bank information. Like there's a special site, it's irs.gov. If it doesn't say irs.gov, you're not on a safe site, because those are the kind of things that criminals will do, because that's their job. Their job is to steal your money. So just like we spend, I once heard, as far as like in being Child Abuse Prevention Month, one of the organizations I know that Vanessa served with, I have a lot of respect for Austin House, the work that they do. And it's always interesting, if you've not ever heard Don Mosley, their director, give his presentation to educate people about predators.
Sure.
That's what he shares. Is like, it's like a pipeline to them, and that, as sick as that is, that's the truth of predators who prey on children. That's their job. They will spend 8 to 10 hours a day, and they have a bunch of kids they're trying to victimize. They just need one or two to slip up. They don't need however many they have that they're trying to perpetrate on. But it's all very important, and I can't say enough about how important it is to support those organizations this month and throughout the year. But this month we really highlight it. But and it's hard right now for those organizations to be able to fundraise, and they depend on those funds.
Sure.
So if you're somebody who has got some stimulus money, but you still have a job, think about maybe if you can help one of those organizations out, because there is plenty of need still. And that is unfortunately one of those things that we do have a need on.
Well, Matthew, I'm curious, when we talk about substance abuse and we talk about, now we're locked inside doors, we know it's lifting, but this has been 6 weeks, and that is a concern. It's something that I think DA always takes very seriously as you work with law enforcement and those local agencies. So speak to a little bit of that, like as you guys are looking and preparing ahead, are you seeing that maybe that rise has come back? Has there been a correlation in the crime that, petty theft, things like that correlate with, drug and that movement of those substances?
Yeah, all of that, all of what we're going through right now with this COVID is really throwing gas on a fire. We know that we've been struggling with substance abuse in Colorado for many years, just like the rest of the country. And it's interesting to kind of keep this in mind. We now have kind of a metric using COVID. So for the last couple of years, nationally, we have lost over 50,000 people to drug overdoses. And that is equivalent to a Vietnam War every year. Compare that to COVID, our numbers are rising very tragically, but we have not even gotten to 50,000 nationally yet. So at this point, we lose more people to drug overdoses every year in the United States than we have to COVID thus far. In Colorado, in the last couple of years, we've hovered around 1,000 overdose doses for the last couple of years. Again, I think we're about at 500. We just crested 500 deaths here today in Colorado. So we've basically gotten to the halfway point to the number of overdoses that we have every year. So it's a huge
can you elaborate on some of those substances? I mean, I suppose people, maybe it's just my thought, do people just automatically assume in Colorado it's just pot? But opioids are huge, and we have a problem kind of across the board. So how does the DA's office handle prosecuting those? And I mean, it's just not so black and white.
Absolutely not, and it's a tough situation. And so the overdoses that we see are primarily from meth. That's the leading killer right now. But right in there is cocaine and heroin. They're really neck and neck. And then of course the normal pharmaceutical opioids. They're all in there. And so opioids and overdoses and drug addiction is a real problem. And I think it's a problem that has been being manipulated by some with an agenda and maybe misunderstood by some others. So let me just provide some context on a prosecutor's position on that. I wish no one would come to court, right? I wish we didn't have crime, and I wish that no one was addicted to drugs. And I think our first effort is to try to make sure that they don't come back to court. And if we could wave a wand as they come into court on a drug possession charge, and wave a wand and make sure that they are healed and never came back to court. If I had that wand, I would be using it every day happily. And so I think there is one part of the criminal justice system that needs to be very compassionate and mindful of drug addiction and the realities of that, and that mental health is also part of that. But we cannot ignore the fact that the very basic fact that drug addiction is fueling a crime wave in Colorado and in Jefferson County. Murders, violent crime, property crime are all up. And it is very, very real and very connected to drug addiction. And those are the same statistics here in Jefferson County, where we have it had an increase of anywhere between 15 to 20% of felonies due to over the last couple of years. And when people say that drugs are a victimless crime, I couldn't disagree more with that. First of all, the first victim is the addict himself or herself, right? It really destroys the individual. I think the next victim is the family and then our communities. And then every one of our crimes, it feels, is connected to drugs, whether that's theft, forgery, motor vehicle theft, and of course, homicides are all connected to drugs.
So to back up a little bit, there's always some discontent in the Liberty community about, well, are we taking liberties away from people? It's their right to do whatever they want to their bodies. So why does this continue to be a problem if we have jails and our prisons overpopulated because of drug offenses, and we're separating families over petty drug offenses? How do you educate the community for that? How do you educate the community to say, you have to start somewhere? And I'm more about being proactive. So drug addiction starts somewhere. It's whatever your view is on it, the gateway drug is probably not what people think. And there's something that's happening somewhere along somebody's life that they make that turn. So instead of, like you said, a perfect world, we could not have a court. How do we get to a place that we're addressing these problems before they're in your courts?
Well, and I think that's where I perhaps disagree, or perhaps there's some misunderstanding about drug addiction, because my perspective is personal responsibility and accountability. And that's not just my position as a prosecutor. I, along the campaign trail and as a prosecutor for nearly 25 years, I've been working with the therapeutic community and really trying to have an open discussion about what we can do to eliminate this scourge of drug addiction in Colorado. And it's their philosophy that personal responsibility and accountability is the heart of all treatment, whether that's a 10-step program, a 12-step program, or even a faith-based program. Accountability and responsibility is at the heart of that. And if we take that away, I think we're lost. And again, the therapeutic community has come to me and said there's basically 3 phases, and these are former addicts who are now counselors. And that is, you go to treatment because you're ordered to go. You think you're going to either die or end up in prison. Then you end up healing a little bit and you go to therapy because you feel like you have to go. You're starting to feel the advantages. And then you finally go because you're healing and you want to go because you know that you've benefited from it. But at each of those stages, accountability and personal responsibility are at the heart of that. And so if there's no responsibility or accountability in the program, well, then there's no incentive to ever go. And I think that's where we have really lost our way in Colorado, is that it has been kind of promoted that we just want to throw everybody in prison. That's a lie. Those facts are not accurate at all. No, very, very few people, probably less than 1%, are in prison just because of a drug possession charge. And those folks have worked themselves there through all of the sentencing possibilities and probably have multiple charges. And that's the last place they could be. The system is really designed to gear them out of the system, or at least the intent is to try to gear them out of the system so that they can.
So it's interesting on that topic. So Westminster's a little unique as far as like some of the things our muni court does, like we do domestic violences, and that's not very typical for a municipality to do that. But some of the other things that we've worked on that I've seen some of the counties do that I really am really behind is like the mental health courts. And so and then I know like Adams County has a veterans court. And I mean, it really goes along with the whole philosophy that break people. And it's kind of to that getting to is personal accountability, but it's still trying to get to that heart of what sent that person down the wrong path. And a lot of times, that's, through broken childhood or or whatever. There's some sort of abuse often that leads people down that path of addiction that then leads them to criminal activity. And, and at some point they do need to be, that doesn't excuse it. Like, it's still a criminal act, right? They're still hurting somebody else in the process of that. But I guess, I'm curious on your take as being the person, hopefully our next DA, how do you see those go in, and how does Jefferson County interact, or do you guys have those kind of programs that kind of, and you have alluded to, like, the goal would, if you had a magic wand, would be to get the person fixed and, get them off of that bad path. So I'm just curious of your take on kind of that shift. And I think that comes into like criminal justice reform and how we're looking at things differently, as far as, the goal would be to get you out of the system, not to continue, the round door of you coming in and out of a jail or a court.
Yeah, so we have in Jefferson County, in the First Judicial District, which is both Jefferson and Gilpin counties, in the First Judicial District, we've been doing reform before reform was a thing. And we have had a diversion program in Jefferson County, I think since early 80s or late 70s, 1970s. And our diversion program is really the model to be upheld throughout the country. And it really goes back to that original point. The first question we ask every client, if they're being screened for the program, is if they take responsibility for what they've done. So we're not spending all of that probationers or all that client's time arguing about the facts of the case. We ask them to take responsibility, and then we can talk to them about what has brought them to the system so that we can try to get them out. And that has been successful. Over 70, they've had 70 to 75% success rate, wow, which is incredible. Now, probation, which we have a lot of great probation officers, their success rate is like 18%. So you can see the difference in the success rate. Also, some other programs in Jefferson County, we also have a vets court and a mental health court, and those have been tremendously successful. The concern that we have with our diversion program in those courts is, in an age of budget issues before COVID hit, can we still afford those? And as the next district attorney in the First Judicial District, we have to afford those. We have to find a way to make those programs work so that we can help people rather than see them come back again and again and again.
So talk to the voters about that budget process for the district attorney's office, for the county, for the sheriff. All of that money comes from somewhere. It's not a magic wand. It's not an endless stream of funds that just come down. And I think voters saw that this past fall when some really tough choices had to be made in Jeffco about closing the floor of the jail and what services can we continue to provide? What are those essential and crucial services? So as a district attorney, explain to the voters, like, where is your funding stream coming from? How do they make sure if this is a priority and they want to make sure criminal justice and all of that is priority in Jeffco, how do they keep that in check for you?
Yeah, so we have two counties, both the Jefferson County and Gilpin County, but as you can imagine, a huge, overwhelming percentage of our budget in the district attorney's office comes from Jefferson County. So we are part of the Jefferson County budget process. And so as Jefferson County's been going through their budget problems, those have been our problems. And my boss, Pete Weir, who's been an extraordinary district attorney and supports me in taking over the office when he leaves, he has done an extraordinary job really trying to prioritize our core values and our core mission in the office to manage over $1 million of budget cuts before COVID hit. So our budget is approximately $20 million. And the problem for our budget is almost 90, it's about 87%, almost 90% is all personnel, as you can imagine. We're a bunch of attorneys, investigators, and support staff going into court doing justice every day. We don't have a lot of physical things that we could perhaps find some cost-saving measures on. So it's all personnel, and so it's when there's cuts, you're talking about cutting personnel, which is district attorneys, investigators, victim advocates, and so it's been a very, very challenging process for us because as our crime has gone up, it's gone up 15 to 20%. we're doing more work with the same or less staff. And as you can imagine, there's a huge tension there. And I'm concerned that the bubble's about to burst.
Yeah, that should be a concern for any organization, public, private, government, to where to prioritize those funds. So I guess, as you were saying with staff, and you have to continue to do as much as needed with no matter the amount of staff that you have. Dave brought up a good point. Westminster is able to take on some of those domestic violence cases within their municipal court. Not that Westminster's not going to see some of their budget challenges on their own. Is that conversations you had with any other cities to look at that kind of a model? Where can municipalities pick up some of that burden and make it more personal? I mean, if some of this is getting proactive approach to criminal justice and trying to stop the cycle, and is that something you see as beneficial to your office and, quite frankly, to the budget?
Yeah, I think there's two things at play here. I think there's prioritization and I think there's innovation. We're going to have to get better. We're going to have to be more efficient. But I think we have to first prioritize exactly what these dollars are going to go to. I think we've lived pretty well over the last 10 to 20 years, and we've been able to afford some things that simply today we can't. And so I have been, before ballot issues were put onto the November ballot last year, I have been talking about prioritization of public safety as a core value, a core function of government. We can't, if we're not safe in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our businesses, well, then the whole thing comes apart. And so that is more important today than ever before. But Vanessa, you raise a great point that we've been in constant communications with chiefs of police, Sheriff Schrader, and city leaders to find out exactly where those boundaries are, where we can innovate, where we can be better. And actually, I'm hopeful, despite the pain that we've been going through with this COVID virus, that perhaps we find some efficiencies that allow us not to spend as much time in court, perhaps, because there's a lot of dead time in court, that we can perhaps use the Zoom meeting, video conferencing, video court to handle a lot of the other things, so that we can conserve our personnel more.
For sure. It all makes sense. And I guess where my mind goes, and I would hope any person in the realm of wanting to do better for our public looks at, well, where can we prevent the crime in the first place? What is that? You had mentioned meth being one of those, the number one thing with drugs and substance abuse, but what is that number one crime that you seem to be prosecuting right now? Where can the public say, it's time, enough is enough? We just as much want personal accountability in our communities. Where can we start looking out to see what is this crime that's happening? Where can we?
Yeah, I can't speak to an exact crime. I have a different perspective. I think the low-hanging fruit that we've been missing for a long time is that recidivism. Because whether or not it's in our county jail or in the prison system, 50% of inmates in the jail or 50% of DOC inmates come back to us within 3 years. And so if you just think about that, right? I mean, as we're pouring the beers out and we're filling it in, and we're just never going to get ahead. And so let's look at those issues. What can we be doing within those facilities to put them in a better position to transition back into the community, certainly from Department of Corrections. I have always thought, since I was a younger prosecutor, that paroling somebody to Colfax to a hotel in the midst of alcohol, drugs, and a lot worse, probably not a good recipe for success. And that's what we've been doing for a long time. So let's innovate on how we can put people in a better position to succeed once they're out of that facility. And I think that goes back to the conversation that it always comes back to, right? Which is, we have a mental health problem. Let's figure out within that system, how can we better address those mental health needs once they're in the system? So whether or not they are on probation, jail, or prison, that we can hopefully put them in a position not to come back, in the same way we have a drug addiction problem like we talked about. So let's innovate and figure out a way to probably get them to a position where they can be where they want to be. I would hope that where they would want to be more successful in the community, so that they don't have to come back and see me.
I couldn't agree more.
So what is, talk to me about what that kind of looks like. So one of the things I know that Westminster just got some money from the state grant was to do the program with having some mental health care professionals on staff. I know one of the things that we've worked on in the past, and I know Arvada has done this as well, and a lot of other municipalities, is about training the officers. So like say, if they go to a call and they see somebody in distress, they're semi-trained to try to figure out, is this somebody who is on drugs, or is this somebody who's having a mental health crisis? Often that's hard because sometimes those things intersect, actually all too often they do. Like when you as a district attorney and in your department, when somebody goes through that, what kind of screening do they go through, so you can kind of make some of those calls and say, what kind of program does this person need to go through? Is this somebody who, for the good of the community, needs to stay off the street? Is this somebody who we think needs to go to a certain program? How does the district attorney's office kind of deal with those folks?
Well, I have a little bit of a concern with loading up our officers too much. I mean, I agree with you. They need to be trained and they need to be sensitive to the issues of the person that they're dealing with. And I'll tell you, in Jefferson County, we are lucky. We are blessed here in Jefferson County with amazing law enforcement from Westminster, Arvada, Jeffco, down to Lakewood and Golden. That's just the facts of the case. I've prosecuted cases all over the state of Colorado, and we are lucky here in Jefferson County to have such a great relationship between our office and the law enforcement community. And I will tell you that I think we need to have that training so that they can meet the needs of the person who they're in front of at that time. But I think if we overload them and we make them mental health counselors, drug addiction counselors, public safety officers, law enforcement officials, I'm very concerned about the safety of the person they're dealing with, as well as the safety of the officer, because if they're wearing 50 hats, that's when I think something can go wrong. And I think there's perhaps a misperception about what law enforcement does on the street every day, that they just like to, go and arrest people and then that's their fun. If you talk to law enforcement, they're there to help the community, and they deal with people on their worst day, at their worst moment, all the time. And I think there's some folks who want them to become drug addiction counselors and give them the authority to basically process them to a therapeutic community. And I just think that we're loading them up with too much at that time. So I guess it's kind of both answers to your question, Dave, which is definitely we need that training, we need that sensitivity, but I don't want to put all of that responsibility on them as they're kind of making millisecond life and death decisions.
I got something. I think you're spot on with that, because my conversations with law enforcement tells me, look, we're educated people. Most of these agencies around require at least a bachelor's degree from us. We know what we're doing, and you're exactly right. We're not going out there to be mental health counselors. We're not going out there to be, a warm, fuzzy hug. We're out there to protect the rights and the individual rights of those citizens, those law-abiding citizens. What we need is a place to take these people. There is not a place, there's not treatment, there's not follow-up care. It is so hard to access mental health care. And if this feeds into that whole proactive solution, if people can get it, we can stop the recidivism, we can get people the help they need. And that in turn, again, utopian society, we could actually lower crime by looking at some of those places. So I think there's so much to be said, Matthew. I mean, for that kind of collaboration, to know that you need to have those conversations with law enforcement, with all those stakeholders, that's how you solve those problems. It's not overnight. This didn't happen overnight. So lot that goes into it.
And I think that's all valid. And I think this gets to something you mentioned about priorities, and really even with the talk about budget. And I mean, even at the municipal level, it's easy as a policymaker to take some of these topics and say, I want to put budget behind them, and not think, okay, wait a minute, there's levels of government in Colorado, like mental health and a lot of that stuff is at the county level. And so as much as it might be nice to have that at the city level, we have our responsibilities in a limited budget of things we should do, just like the county does. And so like if the county's not fulfilling those needs, then we need to talk to our county officials and say, hey, you're not doing your job. And to your point of some of those facilities, some of that's the state. Have they prioritized having facilities throughout the state so that, there are those facilities when you have somebody taken to a mental health facility versus jail, so they don't end up sitting in jail where they probably don't belong. or
Right.
or whatever the situation is. So I think that that kind of is something that is always a it's really a damaging act, because it's not that I don't care about these things as a local policymaker, but I need to make sure that my officers have good squad cars and they have the right kind of equipment and the right kind of training so that they can do our level of government. So that it really takes all levels of government to be able to work together. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important to elect the right people to these different levels of government. And frankly, why I'm willing to endorse you, because I think you'll do a good job. I think you has been a fantastic district attorney, and I want to see that office continue to be a great office. So, because that's so important, I mean, that makes my job easier as a city council person if we know that the next level of government is doing their job.
Well, let me, I appreciate that. And that's why I can't wait for Vanessa to be the next representative in HD 29, because I will tell you, my frustration over the past 5 to 6 years is seeing all of the different things they've done at the legislature, really without any regard for how that has impacted us on the local level. They continue to dial down penalties. They continue to basically rewrite our criminal laws and basically get rid of some laws, all in the name of kind of an agenda. And I think one of the biggest things, one of the greatest examples of that, again, our conversation always kind of comes back to drugs, which is the bill last year to make possession of serious drugs. We're talking fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, making that a misdemeanor. And that is all in the name of reform. And it kind of goes back to what I had said earlier, that you're really ripping our ability to hold anybody accountable or hold them responsible for the crime, and therefore there's no way to treat them. The other component of that is that that's driving up crime, and that drives up crime, which drives up budget problems for all of us on the local level. So all of the reforms are basically unfunded mandates to Westminster and to Jeffco, and we're just left to deal with this huge responsibility that's getting greater and greater and greater without one extra penny. And in that drug misdemeanor bill, while they dialed down all the penalties, making treatment nearly impossible, they did not dedicate 1 cent to drug treatment. And we see that both in drug treatment and mental health. So you can't call it a public health issue and then not try to resource that issue.
I think you're totally speaking to the heart of the issue. I could probably have 10 policy and Pilsners with you from here on out and discuss those issues. I know people that have lived a life of addiction, and you're right when you go back to say that there's personal accountability to it. Where's the personal accountability if it's the same as taking a candy bar? These drugs have life-changing impacts for sure. And I speak from a very personal place. So
we would face a greater penalty if we were doing this in person tonight than if I had 2 grams of fentanyl.
Yeah. Again, it's not a one size fits all. And I think it's so important for voters and taxpayers to know this, that drug addiction and substance abuse, it stems from somewhere, but it goes to a dark place. But these people aren't alone. And the more that we can have that, I guess, that outlook towards it. So I have one question kind of related to that, but we also have some questions that are coming in. So real quick, when we talk about some criminal justice reform, something that I kind of look at is it's hard to look at crimes. And when these are crimes against children or whatever they are, it's hard to look at that person as still innocent before proven guilty in our criminal justice system. There's always talk about what does that reform look like? Are those who are going in as defendants and they're defending their innocence or defending whatever stance they have, do they have the same access to a public defender as the DA's office has to prosecute them? Are they walking in with the same kind of, a talent and skill to defend their liberties just as much? It's hard to talk about. Nobody wants to think that a child abuser should have any rights. But the second we let go of that as society, that's the fundamental part of our justice system. And I'm a huge believer in law and order, and I grew up in a very abusive situation. I don't have a lot of room for that in my life, but rights to rights. So what does that look like going into a public defender's office? Do they get a balance? Are you willing to look at that? Can you speak to it at all?
Yeah, I think public defenders in the state of Colorado, their budget has gone up who knows how much, because they're the only public entity in Colorado that doesn't have to share their budget numbers. But they have been resourced to a huge degree, beginning with the Great Recession, as everybody else's budgets were being cut. I think their budget probably doubled, and so did the budget of the Alternate Defense Council. Their budget has increased by a third. And so there is no doubt that defendants get quality representation from misdemeanors all the way to first-degree murder. They get quality representation, and public defenders and Alternate Defense Council fight for their clients each and every day. I think to kind of talk about the flip side of that equation, that's why this office is so important. The district attorney's office is so important, because not only is it our job to protect the community and public safety and to vigorously prosecute crimes, our job is to seek justice first and foremost. It's not to seek convictions or statistics, it is to seek justice. And that means that we have to safeguard the Constitution and the rights of those defendants, in almost more so than the defense bar. And that starts with law enforcement on the streets, quality trained law enforcement, protecting the rights of that individual, making sure that we have quality investigations under the Constitution, and that we can effectively prosecute those cases. And if we don't have the evidence, then we cannot win that case. If we have an ethical responsibility to dismiss that case. And that's why this office is so important, because if anybody comes in with a political agenda or some type of ideological agenda, and they don't have that core philosophy of strong prosecutorial ethics and integrity, well, then our whole system is lost. And we have seen that around the country. We have seen where political prosecutions or some type of ideological bent has really put those communities at risk.
Absolutely. That's why you're our guy, because it takes that balance, it takes that perspective and objectiveness to hold this position and right to protect the rights of everybody. So thank you for that.
Well, I think all great topics. I want to make sure I give some time for both of you to kind of have a couple minutes to say whatever you want for any potential voters that are in your areas, as well as just share whatever you want to share about your campaign. So I will let Vanessa go first, and then I'll let Matt close us up.
Well, thank you so much. So we did have a few questions. I don't know if everything that came through is pertinent to Matt, but I guess Matt, maybe I just would encourage you, maybe check out some of the comments when we're done and see if you can reply. Some of them are regarding, medicating children. Are we creating a bigger problem in our society? This is very personal to a lot of parents who kids get misdiagnosed, and then does that create an abuse or substance abuse problem down the road? Others regarding just prosecutions of families. Again, we've had a lot of issues with COVID and people trying to be out in the public. So I'm sure people would love to hear in your last few minutes too, just to take a peek at that comment and see if you can speak to it a little bit. So I'll wrap up with, my campaign. We've been inside for 6 weeks. I can't say that I really have a lot of movement, but I'm excited. I'm more energized than I was the week before and the week before that, because I love our state. And I think being inside has made me realize how much I love being out there talking to everybody. So DeMontforColorado.com. Campaigns need money, and it means more to me than to get a couple bucks here and there. They have some big donor out there that I don't even know. So those donations coming in from the community, that's what means the most. Your donation to me means liberty for our communities and a vote for freedom. So DeMontforColorado.com. I will also keep plugging Ralston House and Child Abuse Prevention Month, because it's happening every single day of the year. It's not just April, but please pay attention to that. As Matthew talked about, these are situations that go on underneath the black and white of our society. So that's something I will always fight for down at the Capitol, our child abuse and anything that can help us victim-centered services, much as the DA does down there. So with that, Matthew, take it away. You're our guy.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. I appreciate it. I'm like Vanessa. I was born here, raised here, and this is my home. I grew up here, and this is where my wife and I are raising our beautiful family here. And I just love our community, and that's why I've spent nearly 25 years in the district attorney's office in the 1st Judicial District, fighting for our community. And while I love our community, I have to be honest, I'm very concerned about what's happening in our community, and whether or not it's in Westminster or in Jefferson County or everywhere in between. You know, crime is on the rise, and it's not getting any better. And all the things that we talked about tonight, drug abuse, mental health issues, and some of the reforms that are actually jacking crime up instead of reducing crime, leaving us at the local level to just deal with overwhelming burdens of the system. That's a concern, and that's why this is such an important race, and that's why I'm stepping up, because I want to make sure that the Jefferson County that I know and that I love continues to be the Jefferson County that my kids have. And so to answer some of your earlier questions about that community going out and playing, I can't wait to get out and play in the parks with our kids as well. And I can tell you, law enforcement would love to do anything else other than talk to people in parks about throwing a Frisbee. And that's why, again, elections matter. We have to get some good folks elected. So please go to durkinforda.com. That's DURKINFORDA.com. I'm like you, Vanessa, $5, $10. My favorite contribution, they're all my favorite contribution, but one of my most favorite contributions was a $10 check from a Denver substitute teacher. And so every little bit helps. And let's go forward together.
Well, absolutely. So with just a few minutes left, besides Matthew and myself, we have great candidates in Jeffco. So just to really build that up, you have mentioned so much that it's not just the DA making these decisions. These decisions have to come from leadership in the county. So we've got great people that are ready to step up and take that lead. And I think Joni Inman is going to be that fantastic person to step in that position, make those hard calls, and keep your priorities right there at the top of that Jeffco budget. Beyond that, I absolutely encourage anybody watching, whatever your beliefs are, step outside that and research candidates, because elections have consequences. Every election is local and everything matters. So maybe it's not all those issues you thought that you cared about, but you brought so many things to light. I think everybody's been very much here for 6 weeks, and we need to get back out there, and there's a society waiting for us that keeps turning when we were all at home.
Yeah, and I think, Joni definitely has my full support. I've known Joni for a couple of years. She's a great person. I did the leadership program with her. It's a fantastic candidate for commissioner. I'm glad to support her as well and get her in there with Libby so that they can, work on that budget, because ultimately at the end of the day, there's so much tied to the commissioners being able to prioritize that budget correctly for the things that we've talked about. And I know that's been a real struggle for the DA and Jeff Schrader, who I think is a fantastic sheriff. To be able to make sure that we're prioritizing county dollars to take care of the core services that we expect the county to take care of. So, that's the same as I deal with at the city. Like, I have core services, and so at the county, that's the commissioners who control those purse strings. So, very, very important. But thank you very much, first of all, for joining us. Second of all, for stepping up to be the next DA, and for all the work that you've done for the DA's office and for the city of Colorado and your tenure.
Thank you, guys. It's been a fun time, and I can't wait to see you guys at some event where there's lots of people around.
Yeah. And what event will have those pints, just so we know where to show up, so we can get our own Matthew Durkin pint?
Yeah, make sure when we're all released from lockdown, we know where we can go get one of those.
I got 2 with your names on them.
There we go. They will be showcased soon. I think this event will probably carry on even past. This has been really beneficial for us to reach out, again, have conversations with not just those within our political ideologies, because it matters. So appreciate it, Matt.
Cool.
Thanks.
Have a good night, Matt.
All right, guys. Have a great night.
All right. Good night, everyone.